get started. Thank you very much, first of all,
No problem.
for your time. And congratulations for the wonderful film.
Oh, thank you.
Gone Girl. And so,
Trust him. It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
So the first question is about the film.
Okay.
And it's an adaptation of a very successful novel. And I wonder what was that reading this novel made you think that it could be a great, not a great film, but a great David Fincher film, which is a little bit different.
I don't know. I'm not taking the bait on that. I don't know if anyone here has read the book, but the book has it had a kind of fundamental idea in it that I had never seen before. I'd certainly never seen dramatized, and that was the notion of the narcissistic projections, the ideal version of ourself that we project to seduce or ensnare our mates, and the notion that it never occurs to us that they're doing the same thing, and that 3 to 5 years down the line, one or more of the parties might be bored with all of the work that it takes to present this facade, and then ultimately the anger that engenders. And I thought that was a really modern kind of idea. And I had, there's the page turner, there's the twists and the turns and those aspects of it. But it was really this fundamental notion that if you've been presenting yourself to someone who's been presenting, if you've been presenting an idea of yourself to someone who's been presenting an idea of themselves to you, you can find yourself 3 to 5 years down the line in a relationship with somebody you have no idea who they are. And I thought that was fun. And then you throw into that some murder and...
So maybe we can go back to the beginning.
Okay.
To the beginning.
Let's go to the beginning.
You didn't actually were a student in a film academy. You started from the inside of the industry.
I went to a summer program for filmmaking when I was just out of high school, and I saw enough to know that at that point in time for me, film school was not for me.
Why you think it was not?
In particular, I was surrounded by a lot of people who didn't want to pull cable or push dollies or wear gloves and put scrims and lights. Everybody wanted to be a director. Everybody wanted to be an actor. And I was kind of like, I really want to be a good grip. I want to be a good focus puller. I was much more interested in kind of the tactile. I feel I learned better. At that time, probably even true today, I learned better by making my own mistakes instead of. I didn't want to come at it conceptually or theoretically. I wanted it to be up to my eyeballs in it.
So you made commercials and video clips for a lot of years.
I didn't. I mean, the first thing I did, I worked for an animation company in Mill Valley. I got a job moving Xerox machines and working in the photo lab and running to Ace Hardware and buying power strips and being helpful, trying to be helpful. And I worked my way up to being a first assistant, camera loader, working on an animation stand with very, very rudimentary motion control. And then out of that, I went to Industrial Light and Magic, who was hiring. And I worked in Go Motion, which was way before computer-generated imagery. They would have puppets that have rods going into them, and you could program them on a potentiometer. You could adjust the position in space, and then the computer would play back those moves, and you did it very much like multi-track recording. So there's a puppet about 3 feet high, and you could take it and you could move its foot, and you could sort of prescribe the movements of its feet, and then somebody else would come in and take care of the gross movement of the hips and the knees. And I worked on Return of the Jedi, the chicken walkers, the tanks. I worked on that. So I did that for about 8 or 9 months. And then I moved in the matte painting department, and I worked photographing matte paintings, which sounds really dull, but it was pretty incredible because you were the crossroads, you were the nexus of a lot of different disciplines. There were people painting, you had to go out, you had to photograph live action actors, you had to bring that stuff back in. The paintings had to be integrated, so there was rear projection, there was front projection, sometimes you were rear projecting or front projecting, black and white RGB separation. So you learned, basically how to operate an optical printer. So it was a interesting, it was the lab within the lab. We were sort of a department that had a lot of different things that needed to be done and a lot of different ways to integrate the imagery that we were doing. And so it was a great place to learn, because you could constantly, you had to keep figuring out new ways to skin the cat. And then from there I went on to directing, crappy TV commercials and music videos.
Yeah. Well, I know you don't like to talk about Alien 3, but anyway,
Okay.
I found this fantastic quote that you said, correct me if it's not true, that a lot of people hated Alien 3, but no one hated it more than myself.
Yeah, that's true.
But anyway, what did you take from that experience that later was useful for you in your career?
It's hard to, it's a hard thing to say at 27 that I did feel that I had been sort of passed over and that I hadn't been given the opportunities that I wanted to be given. I was waiting for the right opportunity to make a first feature film, and somebody came calling with a bad script and a release date that had to be made and circumstances that were anathema to doing good work. But I always loved the Alien movie series, and I always loved the idea of the haunted house movie, and I felt like we had an idea for a third film, but nothing can prepare you for, when somebody gives you $66 million to make your first movie, no one can prepare you for the kind of scrutiny that you fall under. I mean, especially in a in a corporate situation like that where you're making a sequel. And I think that the movie studios tend to feel like they have an idea of how things should be done. And especially if it's a sequel, then they can point to the other two and go, it needs to be more like this. So it was a very awkward, there was a part of it that was exciting to them that we were setting out to do something that was, kind of outre, and we could talk about Tarkovsky, and we could talk about, we could have all these discussions about what the intention was, but when it got right down to it, they didn't want to be bothered with all of the stuff that made it different from the other two movies. They wanted to be reminded continually of the things that made it the same as the other two movies. So it became a very interesting struggle for who was going to make the decisions about what would finally end up on the screen, and I was in no position to mandate. So you do the best you can, and you escape with your life, and you try to live it down.
Yeah. Well, in this sense, David Lynch was here last year in the same spot, and he gave one single advice to the students, to the future filmmakers, is he said, fight for the final cut. If you don't have the chance to do what you have conceived, it's not worth it. This has also been a struggle in your career with Final Cut. How?
I think Final Cut is one of those things that people tend to, I think if you don't understand how the industry, how the company town of Hollywood works, maybe it seems like you've got to have this, they have a sort of Damocles hanging over you in that they have the ability not to release your movie. And So you need to be able to fight to have the thing that protects you from their ability to maul whatever the... But I think bigger than the power to exercise your... I think the greatest thing that all filmmakers need to have is the ability to articulate your intention. Because if you can do that, and you're going to need to do it, you're going to need to do it with the screenwriter, you're going to need to be able to do it with the financier, you're going to need to be able to do it with every single actor that you're hoping to seduce to be part of your cast. You're going to have to do it with the marketing people, you're going to have to do it with publicity, you're going to have to be able to explain why your film needs to be treated in a different way, why it needs to be understood that it's not whatever everyone thinks it is. That is more important. I mean, I feel like more important than the legal ability to be able to say, I don't have to listen to you, is the ability to say, I hear what you're saying, and I understand exactly what it is that you're saying, and it has no place in this film for the following reasons. People tend to be, I think people tend to be reasonable if you can be supremely specific about what it is that you want to accomplish. You know, Fight Club was made without Final Cut. Now,
that's amazing.
Well, aside from the fact that, you know, we got one person whose job it was to sell it to the MPAA, who came back and said, you can't have a gun going off in someone's mouth. It immediately makes it NC-17. And they don't write down their list of these, the MPAA will not write down their list of rules, but this is one of those rules. You know, I was able to say to the person who's giving me this information, oh, that's really unfortunate because that scene's in the book that you bought, it's in the script that you approved, it's in the storyboards that you paid for, and it costs $400,000 to execute. So I think you're gonna have to go tell Bill Mechanic that we have to cut this shot, because I can't tell him, it'll break his heart. And this guy who worked for Bill Mechanic said, let me give it one more try with the MPAA. And he came back the next day and said, as it turns out, I got it. I said, oh, thanks, dude. So I think you have to work within, you know, there are a lot of people who are going to stand between you and what it is that you want to do. Some of them are going to be people that you search out and that you beg to be a part of your project. And they are going to have a difference of opinion. And they're going to think that you're an idiot because you want it to be done this certain way. You're going to come up against that. It's not just the financiers. And you're going to have to be able to tell them your story, and you're going to have to win them over. And that is so much more important than the ability to take someone to court and tie up the release of a movie in litigation. It's so much more important to be able to seduce and cajole and reason and thrill people with what your intention is. It's so much more important than the ability to say, I don't have to listen to you. Because I think it just engenders the wrong kind of, it's a collaborative process. It's not a watercolor. If it was a watercolor, you get to do whatever you want. When watercolors cost $90 million, you got a lot of people that, or you're gonna have to get on the same page, and that's your responsibility.
Well, in particular, on the Fight Club, but also other of your films, and well, they have been the subject of heated debate, you know, and it seems like
really,
yeah. Well, some critics, well, you're aware that some critics ask themselves, to what degree are your films a celebration of something violent or the anarchistic subject, or a celebration of something that it really intends to critique. I mean, if you can comment on this topic.
Look, you kind of never know what people are going to do with the characters that... I didn't create Tyler Durden, and I didn't espouse what Tyler Durden believed. I believed I was being fairly clear about my sense that, Tyler's Nietzschean Uberman doesn't have a lot of room. There's not a lot of room in modern society for the Nietzschean Uberman. The idea in and of itself was kind of youthful and naive. And I felt that we made a compelling case for the fact that Tyler Durden's way was probably not the way the way that people needed to move in order to get beyond the malaise and the anger and the depression that the narrator was experiencing. But it was something that he had to engage with, and he had to sort of work through. It makes all the sense in the world to say we have to be thoughtful about the ideas that we put out into the world because people can misperceive them. But I think it's the job of cinema is an inherently risky and exciting and imperfect and emotional medium, and it has to include all of those things. As soon as you start limiting what it is that people can say through movies, you're kind of inherently uncinematic. And so I feel like, yeah, we have to weigh that stuff. We can't just, if you make torture porn, and you have to be careful about the ideas that if you're showing the most effective way to make explosives, you have to be thoughtful about it. And by the way, we took out the most, sort of incendiary, incendiary is the exact right word. We took out a lot of the stuff that was troubling to the Los Angeles Police Department, and especially their bomb squad, as it related to what the movie showed procedurally of how to make gel ignite. But I didn't feel in the end that we wanted to, I felt that the absurdity of a man taking a woman's hand and saying, "You met me at a very strange time in my life," while all around them buildings tumble, would be so absurd a notion that people would appreciate the humor of it. And then, of course, 2 years later, it's a very different, the image has a different kind of meaning. But you can't know those things, and we're not responsible for that. What we were doing was satirical.
Well, you said cinema is imperfect. You're renowned for your perfectionism at work, for your extraordinary attention to the detail, and which is clearly, we can see it in the quality of the work. But to end up... I don't know,
I think perfectionism, again, I think perfection, people who label other people perfectionists are probably just lazy. But I think that it's a very, very, very powerful medium. A group of people who are mostly strangers are sitting in the dark, and they've given you access to their brains through their eyes and their ears for 2 hours, 2.5 hours. That's a big responsibility, and you have to, and to me, directing is not so much what you want to see. I mean, on the day, all the meetings leading up to the day is about what you want to see. On the day, it's about limiting all the stuff that you don't want to see. What's confusing about this? I'm trying to tell a story where two people meet for the first time. It's a cute party, and they're, but I want them to be even. I want it to be a level playing field. I want it to be a 50-50. I want it to be two people in a proscenium. No one's ahead of no one's bigger than anybody else in the frame. You're meeting them. So you go through all the things. You're kind of defining a psychology for it. You're defining a plan for how you're going to execute it. But when somebody walks by with a giant red hat behind them, right at a critical moment in their interaction, you can say, we got to get rid of this red hat because I can't see what they're doing because I'm watching this person walking back and forth with the red hat. You can talk about that as being perfectionism, or you can just say, look, it is your responsibility to edit out those things that people are going to see that take their eye off the ball. You know, you need them to see behavior. You need to see a meet cute. You need to see a man seduce a woman, or vice versa. You don't need to be watching the woman in the red hat. So, you know, the things that, you know, my particular disorder became more exacerbated when I finally had high definition video taps and I could look at it and go, what are those people doing over there? You know, it's troubling because you're watching something that you're hoping is sophisticated and adult and has all this, you know, you're dovetailing certain lines and dialogue and behaviors, and then there's somebody over there yakking, and you go, I gotta get rid of that. And it can be a debilitating thing for, you know, Mark Ruffalo made a joke about it once, you know, that I was shooting a take 17 or something. He really thought he had nailed it, and I walked right past him and went to somebody way deep in the background and told them to move 3 feet to their left. And he felt debilitated by that. I mean, he was joking, but it's, but you have to remove those things that are going to, you have a very, very limited amount of time to make your point. And being concise is, you know, one of the hallmarks of directing. You have to make your point and get out of Dodge.
Yeah. So in this sense, to end up with a masterpiece, like Zodiac, like Social Network, like Fight Club, like Seven, what is more essential? Is it the hard job, or is it the talent and the vision?
You're wrangling a circus that has to, over the course of 100 days, this movie took 106 days to shoot. Dragon Tattoo took 150 days to shoot. Over those 100+ days, you need everybody to peak, depending on what you need from them, what side of the room you're on, what you're looking at. You need everybody to peak at the same time. Boom operator has to peak, dolly grip has to peak, camera operator has to peak, actors have to peak. In the over the shoulder, you know, you may have the most wonderful actor in the world and you're just seeing past their ears. And if they're doing this, it's incredibly distracting. So you got to go to, you know, Laurence Olivier by any other name and go, just hold still while we get this. You're trying to get everybody to be on the same page, everybody to be in the same movie, everybody to be in the same moment. And that's a lot of work. That's what you're doing. You're sculpting behavior over time. And you're given a very, very finite amount of patience that the audience has for you to get those ideas across. And to think of it in that way, it's not Chinese checkers. It's not about, okay, well, I did that, I did the over, and now I'm doing, no, it's three-dimensional chess. It's, you know, as I say to most of the actors that I work with, I don't want your best version of this scene to mandate how the scene gets cut. I want the best version of the story to mandate where I am at any point in the room. So you're going to have to be good. If I have 15 setups, you're going to have to be good at least 15 times. And you're going to have to be good when he's good. You know, when you're working with kids, that's another thing. You know, one of the gifts of Panic Room was being able to listen to Jodie Foster interpret, because for the most part, you know, the set for the Panic Room was probably the size of this stage, and there's like 85 people trying to work inside this thing, 2 cameras, and here's little Kristen Stewart, who's 11 years old. And I would climb over everybody and get to the doorway and talk to her through the door and say a lot of things that I thought were helpful. And then I would go away and I'd have my headset on and I would hear Jody say, chin down, a little faster. Oh, yeah, that's what it needed to be. Like to listen, and here's somebody who's the perfect intermediary if you want to talk to a child actor. She's been there. She knows exactly what that's like. So that's, you're juggling cats.
So in this conversion to digital that in the last years, what do you think that digital adds to your work? It's more about the image or more about the workflow?
Well, initially it was about the workflow. Now I think the images are amazing. I think that, you can safely say that anything that you can get with a film camera, you can emulate with a digital camera if you're willing to give it enough time and do enough delving into it. If you're able to, really look at an image and be able to describe what it is that you love about it, you can emulate anything. But for me, digital is, initially it was a pain in the ass. It was hard. You had giant recorders and these fat cables that connected these very primitive, low-resolution cameras to these behemoth recorders, and that was a problem. And there were people who Harris Savides, who shot Zodiac, hated them. Hated every second.
Really?
Yeah, couldn't stand it. But also found an amazing way that a CCD, high definition, sideline ENG camera could make something look really beautiful and really and oddly period. And I think the thing is, again, it's all about taste. Equipment's easy. Every time I see kids who say, well, how am I going to make my movie unless I can, get Hollywood to pay for it? It's like, get an iPad.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have an iPad. Your parents don't have an iPad. Like, someone has an iPad. Like, go make your movie. You can write on it. You can email that script around to your friends. You can get them all to show up at the same place. You can film with it. You can edit with it. There's no excuse.
Okay, one last question and we throw it
Okay,
to the audience,
one last.
Okay?
This has got to be a good one.
Well,
a lot of pressure.
No, it's about the visual design of your films because
this film?
No, of your films in general,
All
because
films.
you have a signature. I mean, an aesthetic signature. Though no film looks exactly the same as the others. They're very quite different. But how do you approach the design? How do you work with the cinematographer in this sense? And how do you conceive the look and the feel of the film? What do you think about? What are the criteria?
Well, in the same way that I described the process of working on any given day about removing obstacles between intention and the communication of an idea, design for a movie has to start from what do we want people to... Here's a weird way of looking at it. And I think that people get very bogged down in glass and steel and aluminum and this many watts and this much, interior latex paint versus, you can get into square footage. Here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make strangers feel something at the same time. So everything that you do as you are defining what you're going to do is about making strangers feel something all at the same time. If you talk to a production designer and they're good, they're not talking to you about, oh my God, do you have any idea how many people it's going to take to come in here and, we got to lay all the subfloor, we got to do this, how much paint it's going to take. They're not talking to you about that. They're talking to you about the feeling. They're talking to you about the thing that you want to evoke. They're talking to you about, well, I don't think that Benjamin at this point in his life should be living upstairs. I think he should be living downstairs. And I think the reason why is because he has to be living with the help. He can't So you have those kinds of discussions. Everything that you're, when you're talking to Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, you're not talking about use this synthesizer or this drum machine or whatever. You're talking about, I need a feeling happening here. I want, with this movie, the thing I said to him when I showed him was, I want spa music. I want I want your version, because he can't do anything like anybody else. He's gonna make it Trent Reznor. I want your version of the kind of music that they play when you get a massage. It's always supposed to be this music that kind of calms you and lets you know everything's going to be okay. Give that to Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross and see what they come back with, and you end up with something that makes you go, it just sounds like the hair standing up in the back of your neck. But it still has this idea behind it, because the idea is the important thing. When you talk, the visual look of a film is almost never a discussion about, what did you see Rear Window, or did you see, you're almost never, I don't
Use
think in
references.
those, not really. I mean, mostly I reference news, the reference on this movie was very much reality television. Was not so much about, we knew that there was a big difference between the inside of the house and the outside of the house. One of the things that became really evident in the laying out of what the interior needed to do, because we need to have scenes that take place in the kitchen, we need to have scenes that take place in the sitting area, we needed to have a staircase, there's an act of violence that happens on the staircase, she has to have an office. We started talking about where would her office be located in this house. It should be off the kitchen, because there should be that kind of weird, domesticated, like the idea of the wife as, chief information officer. There were ideas that we were sort of talking about, but we never looked at it as, we never put the conformist in and said, what can we do that looks like this? You're kind of, you want to strip it back to the things that these characters would have access to. I go back to one of the things that we became aware of when we scouted Missouri and we saw the exterior of the house that we wanted. We said, this is the promenade. You can have press on two sides. There's a hill that goes up to it. You can look down on the street and see there's only one way in and out of the neighborhood. He would be trapped on this little peninsula. This is what we want for his house. But the house that we had designed the interior for was massive, was so much bigger than the exterior. And then we started thinking, well, who cares? I mean, when you go inside, his world has to be sort of self-contained. It's okay that it's actually 6, 7, 8 feet bigger than the exterior of the house. We could allow for that, and actually helped us out in terms of staging, because we didn't have to fly walls. We could shoot from anywhere inside that we wanted to by making it slightly overscaled. And then we started thinking about, okay, well, what does that do to the furniture? Well, we want to buy the furniture in out of a catalog. We want it to be, classic American, maybe even colonial kind of overstuffed, overscaled. And you start to put it into this massive space, and you realize you can't fill this house. It's just, and so you become aware of how lonely it is. And that was a good thing. We were like, that's kind of what this is talking about. This is a mausoleum for a marriage. And so it still needs to be, there needs to be a seating area, there needs to be the staircase, but there needs to be this emptiness in between. It should have been filled with kids, but it's not. You have a room upstairs off the hall that has a cat litter box in it, and that's the cat. There's no life to this place. It's kind of, so the bigger it was on the inside, it actually helped us support some of these ideas that were sort of floating around in the backdrop of the script.
Okay,
Okay.
so we have 15, 20 minutes.
Okay.
And we'll
I'll
throw
try
it
to
up
talk
the
faster.
audience. First question.
I just want to know about your experience doing House of Cards. This is a very interesting series.
My experience was good and bad. my first foray into television, and I had been warned that I would not have the kind of time and money that I was used to, which is fine. It was tricky. It was, you see that television is, it's really the only place to go of what you want to talk about is character, because there's no time for characterization in movies anymore. We're really, motion pictures have become basically destruction pornography, and you don't have any room to introduce a character, have them say this is what I'm about, have them dramatize, behave in a way that shows that, and then have them confronted with the fact that that's might not be the case. Television is ripe with characters who say they're about one thing and then show you over time that they're actually hypocrites. Movies very much are a straight line. It's really about, you got to be in the fast lane, and you got to get to the next. Movies have become a study in getting your money's worth, and so people, I think, feel that an audience needs to see a lot of shit happen. So, they're willing to compromise a lot of how layered, nuanced, and the people are in the drama in order to make the drama as streamlined as possible. But I enjoyed it very much. I'm doing a lot of television now, and I hope to do some really off-putting and interesting stuff.
Hi. What are your thoughts about Amy's character from Gone Girl?
Well, she's complicated. I never want to make a movie where I don't like one of the characters. I even like villains for the most part in my movies. I like John Doe, as morally repellent as he is, he's got a point, and I think I think it's important. I'm always interested in the conflict between factions who are correct. So I think that makes the most interesting drama. But I really like Amy. I do understand Amy. I think she has issues, but she's fascinating to me. Sure.
Hi. You work with great writers such as Aaron Sorkin and Eric Roth. So my question is, how do you
I'm sorry,
involve
who?
Eric Roth in
Yep,
Benjamin
the
Button?
Eric Roth, yeah.
Yeah. So how do you involve yourself in the writing process?
I involve myself in the adapting process. I leave writing to writers, just like I leave acting to actors. I think it doesn't behoove me to get involved in something that I don't have the patience for and don't understand. So I feel like, I've been extremely lucky to work with literally the best people that you can imagine who do that. So I don't want to upset that by overstepping my bounds ever.
Really weird using the colors, because you use a lot of greens and a lot of yellows related to his later question.
Mm-hmm.
So my point is, why do you love so much the green and yellow? Because it's a unusual color in cinema, like it looks so ugly. And we notice because on Tumblr we do GIFs and edits on scripters, and it's really, really, really difficult to make them look good in a photo set or something.
Green is a color that really, really disappeared in about the mid-1980s, because a lot of telecines and a lot of televisions, a lot of displays. Sony is one of the greater offenders of this, but there's a lot of pink that was sort of injected into making people look healthy and happy. And so displays, and you can see it on, when you open your MacBook, your laptop, you'll see that there's a lot of extra pink and magenta in the lower ends. And I hate that. I think it sucks. And I think that the idea of like pink, healthy, happy people is fraudulent and needs to be destroyed. So I maybe overdo it sometimes. The yellow is really what happens when you rate a digital camera at 4,000 Kelvin and then shoot between 2800 and 3200 Kelvin practical sources. And you do get that kind of exacerbated yellow. And I just didn't feel like when you correct it out, people's, especially blonde women's hair tends to look kind of grayish, and their faces then go into this sort of ruddy pink thing. So I don't have a love for green as much as I have a hatred for pink.
Hello.
Okay. There you go.
Sorry. I want to ask you about the Brad Pitt character in Seven because I see a lot of similitudes between 12 Monkeys and Seven in the character of Brad Pitt. That kind of tics and that, that things. And I want to ask you if that's because he records both movies more or less at the same time, or if it's...
It wasn't at the same time. He finished with us, went right to Pittsburgh and did 12 Monkeys. But I don't really see much of a similarity. I think that there's a kind of thoughtlessness and callowness that David Mills has. And I don't really remember the character in 12 Monkeys. I saw the movie, but I don't remember it well. So I don't know that I can...
They are not the same, but I mean, some kind of tics and moves.
The hair is the same?
Yeah. That too.
I'll take it up with him, but I...
So when you see David Mills, you see the character that you see...
Yeah, I do. I thought what he did with that, I mean, it was a kind of a... it's a character that could be... It could be stupid, and I thought that what he did with that was, I thought it was incredibly interesting. It was the first time I'd worked with somebody who was sort of, as an actor who was my age and got my references, and then to watch a guy who doesn't get a lot of credit for his thoughtfulness and his specificity, and watch him attack that and say, no, he should have sports ties, and he should have this, and he should have this kind of a holster, and this is the kind of gun, and these are the kind of shoes. I mean, to watch him put that thing together was, I give him a lot of credit. He was impressive.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hello.
Hey.
Some of us are actors, so could you please tell us 3 things that you expect or you like from an actor when working with him?
Yeah, I have an inordinate amount of respect for actors. I think it's one of absolutely the hardest things that you can do is divide your consciousness between not thinking about what you're doing at all and having to worry about how it's coming across. That I don't think there's anything that's more difficult to do than that. Having said that, it is playing dress up, and so I have no extra empathy beyond my appreciation for people who do something that I could never do. But I don't put it on a pedestal beyond what camera operators do. I don't put it on a pedestal beyond what writers bring to the equation. And so I believe in a kind of a tough love approach with actors. I think that they need to know that you are hearing everything that they're saying, that you are processing it, and you need to be able to count on them showing you real effort. And by effort, I'm not talking about sweat. I'm talking about presence. I don't trust actors who don't listen to other actors. If an actor is I wear a headset that allows me to hear everybody's mic. So I'm you know, when I hear an actor directing another actor, and I hear what, you know, what they're doing is in service of something that's about vanity or, you know, those are things that I shut down immediately. I think there has to be, this is not to say I always have the right, I don't always have the best ideas. I'm not always right, but I'm always for the movie. My predominant characteristic, nobody goes away at the end of the day thinking that they cared more about that movie or that scene on that day because job. And I think that it's there to relieve the actor of the responsibility of caring. You know, I want them to see that, you know, I had their best interest at heart and that I was prepared to go the extra, not to make them look good, but to make them be believable and be truthful and be present for everyone around them. You know, when actors have a hard time acknowledging the other people around them, generally, I mean, you can get good performances from people like that, but generally those aren't the performances that people remember. You know, when people are still talking about David Mills and people are still talking about John Doe and people are still talking about Tyler Durden, it's because the person that was in that wardrobe on that day saying those lines, they cared about the impression that they made on everyone around them, not just the camera. They cared about being there. And that for me is the most, you know, Joel Kinnaman came and did 2.5 days on Dragon Tattoo. I mean, we thought it would be a bigger part of the sequel. We thought it would be, but he came and he showed up and I mean, it was totally thankless. You know, I love that guy for that. I think that he has my, you know, undying respect. That's what it's about. It really is, you know, ultimately it's an act of generosity. And if you keep that in mind, and it's hard to, it's really hard to, 14 hours into a shoot day, you know, you are not thinking about how can I be more generous. You're thinking about who do I have to blow to leave, you know? Everybody's, so that becomes, you know, that's what you have to fight. You have to fight. Remember, you know, Blu-rays live on. and this is your opportunity to do something that's memorable. And every bite at the apple. That's why, you know, it always confounds me when actors say, well, why do I have to do 17 takes of it? It's like, you know, and then you see, I've seen some actors and friends of mine who do theater, and I'll go see their play, and they'll say, oh, you should have come Tuesday. It's like, what? I hate that. I hate the idea that I should have come Tuesday. I want to see the best version of it. So that's what I'm going to do. It's like, if you need a little more grinding to get you to that place where you have one more take, one more shot at it, you know, and to be great, it's worth it.
Okay, we have time for one
Oh,
last
jeez, that was
question.
fast.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was fast, yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm new in filmmaking, so it's not going to be a tricky question. I was just wondering, what have you
Should we just stop
found?
now?
What have you found more difficult between telling a real life story or a fictional story?
Well, all movies are fictional stories. It's complicated to make movies about and from other people's real life experiences, in that you have to be respectful of that. You know, especially when you're talking about a film where, you know, as I said in Making the Zodiac, I care what Mike Mageau thinks of the movie because he got shot in the face. And I don't want to make a movie where the guy who got shot in the face says that movie's bullshit. I feel like if you're going to be respectful of someone else's horrendous circumstance, that they would be part of a story that in its unsolved nature continues to kind of torture us, That for me is interesting, but I don't want that guy out in the world saying, I feel used, I feel, I feel like my plight was reduced and made frivolous. I feel like the violence that transpired in the movie was, devoid of acknowledging the real suffering that happened. I think that's what you got to do. I think all violence in movies, the audience has to feel it. If they don't feel bad, if they don't feel horrible about violence, it's a problem. I think it's a problem for the movie. They got to feel it. Even in Fight Club, which is satirical, you want people watching the film and going, ow, that looks like it hurts. I don't want, that great line in Steve Martin's Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid. He gets shot for the second time in the shoulder in the exact same place. And he holds it and he goes, this is never going to heal. I don't want violence in movies to be like that. I don't want it to be a joke. I want people to recoil from it and think it's awful.
Okay, so
Okay.
we don't have
Thank
more
you.
time. Thank you very much.